Hi y'all, my name is Brooke and I'm here to welcome you to Band Brooke, and today I am going to be diving into my January 2021 TBR because thank heavens 2020 is finally over. That said, before we get into the books, I want to apologize for the lighting situation and the shadows dancing in the background. Apparently I am a vampire and can only be bothered to do things at night, and so it's a bit dark. Like a lot of the books that we are going to be talking about, because I will predominantly be reading thrillers and horror if things go as planned. Now, I know that these days most people get their book suggestions from Reese Witherspoon, but I was going through Instagram like you do the other day when I was bored, and I saw that Emmy Rossum, who is Fiona Gallagher on Shameless, recommended Leave the World Behind by the author Rumaan. And I thought, if I let fictional Fiona and her Gallagher family take me through the depths of depravity and impropriety, should I not also trust this talented actress to point me in the right way for literary adventure? And I decided to heed her call. So I went and I ordered this book. Now, this apparently is a story about a family with two kids that is living in New York, and they decide that they want some peace, some quiet, so they decide to retreat to an idyllic home in Long Island where they are going to sun themselves, sit at the pool, drink their tropical beverages, and do the whole shebang. But in the middle of their vacation, there is a knock on the door, and there is an older couple that shows up and claims to be the owners of the estate that they are staying at. And these owners tell them that shit has hit the fan in New York City, there is a grid down situation, and they need to let this couple in so that they can have safety and shelter in the middle of the chaos, because first of all, this is their property, and second of all, it's the right thing to do. But because there's a grid down situation and the power has gone out and the radios and the television and the internet are all down, they can't verify the identity of this couple. They can't verify what is happening out in the world at large. And so they have to figure out whether they are safe. But according to the cover flap, this older couple also has to figure out whether they are safe with this vacationing family. And in addition to the whole celebrity endorsement situation, I was interested because 2020 made me very interested in preppers. I have always been interested in fringe groups in general, but 2020 had me, like many others, start thinking about food supplies and toilet paper and how to deal in an emergency circumstance that you might not have anticipated. And so I started reading about prepping. And there are a lot of things around the prepping community that are really interesting to me, but the further I go down the prepper Reddit rabbit hole, the more I'm interested in the psychology of dealing with large-scale shit hit the fan scenarios, where you don't know who you can trust, you don't know who you can turn to. The people that you normally trust might not be trustworthy anymore because things like resources are limited, food, water might be limited, and you can't always know who trustworthy news sources are either to give you updates on the scenario that you're dealing with as new changes come. So I've been like going down this rabbit hole where I've been watching shows like Jericho because I want to know how communities would deal with shit hit the fan situations. Yeah, so anyway, that's a whole tangent, but I'm really interested in like the psychology of emergency situations and group dynamics and how people define their roles in situations like this. And so I think this is going to be interesting for a lot of reasons. The next book that I'm going to talk to you about is The Institute by Stephen King. I have never in my life read anything by Stephen King, which is really weird because I am obsessed with things that go bump in the night. I also love the television shows and the movies that have been made after his books. So I loved original It, I loved the remake of It, and one of my favorite cheesy sci-fi shows of all time, of which there are many, is Haven. And that was based off of his short story, The Colorado Kid. So I am very familiar with different offshoots of the Stephen King universe, right? But I've never read his books. I decided to pick this particular book up because I decided to start a book club. In 2020, one of the last books I read was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and I loved it. And in that book, there is this book club that reads mostly true crime, but also some thrillers and horror and things like that. And I was like, that is what I'm missing in my life. That is what I need in 2021. So I decided to start a horror slash thriller slash maybe true crime book club. And after I got people together that would be interested, I sent out a survey and I had a bunch of different options for different books that could be our first pick, not really knowing yet what kinds of thriller or horror subgenres people were interested in reading. But everyone sort of unanimously wanted to read this latest Stephen King book, and so I decided to pick it up. Let's talk about the book itself and what it's actually about. So my understanding is that The Institute is about a boy who goes to sleep in his own home, is abducted, and wakes up in a room that looks exactly like his room at his house, except he's essentially in this boarding school for other children that have been abducted. And what they all have in common is that they have special powers. So they are telekinetic, or they can do things with their minds. They can manipulate the environment around them without touching anything, that kind of thing. So I'm thinking kind of like X-Men sort of characters, but instead of having, you know, someone that will guide them and show them how to harness their powers for good, they have these people that are manipulating them and trying to use their powers for their own gain. And if these kids go along with what they're asked to do, they are treated well enough. They're given tokens for the vending machine. If they are not doing what they are asked, they are very brutally punished. So that's all I know about this book. I am always interested in horror that has a tinge of the supernatural. That's my favorite kind of thing to read. But again, this reminds me sort of more of X-Men than anything else. This book is also a chunker. It comes in at like 550 something pages, which usually is enough to scare me off of a book. I think 200 to 250 pages is perfect. I'll fight you on this opinion, but I gotta give the people what they want, and the people have spoken, and this is the book. The next thing that I want to read is called Shadow of the Lions. It's by Christopher Swann, and this is a book about a boys' boarding school in Virginia for very wealthy and elite young men. I am a sucker for campus novels because I work on a university campus, so if you can give me a university campus book or a boarding school book, I will gobble it up in seconds. And this follows a guy who is, I think, a senior in high school, whose name is Matthias, and his best friend goes missing. They try to figure out if maybe he has run away with the assistance of maybe a groundskeeper or cook or someone that isn't an instructor but that otherwise works on this campus. They try to figure out if maybe he was dealing with suicidal ideation. They think, well, maybe shit, he just got snatched. So because this boy has a very rich and affluent family, that has a lot of strong ties to influential people in the community, they bring in the FBI, but then the FBI quickly disappears, and there's all this sort of shadow around this case, these whispers that don't turn into anything. So fast forward about 10 years, and Matthias is still sort of reeling with the loss of his friend. He's never really processed his trauma, and he is a author, but they thought he was like this prodigal talent, and he put out this first book that was amazing and beloved by all, and then could not produce a second book that was worth publication. And so he's kind of been like doing coke and partying and like trying to live the life in New York, but finally realizes like this is going nowhere fast, and I have to make something of myself if this fame evaporates like it looks like it's going to. And he is offered a job teaching at this boarding school where he lost his friend. So just like every other thriller ever, where they have to go back to their hometown or their school or former community, he is sort of gripped with this desire to figure out this unsolved mystery. And so he decides that he is going to take this upon himself and goes to talk to people that were in whatever way associated with this case. And find some pretty startling things about this school that he is now working for. So I think that this is going to be a really interesting read. The other thing that I want to point out is that this is published by Algonquin Books, which is a small publisher out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I'm really interested in indie publishing, but I'm also interested in small and academic press publishing, and so I try to support smaller presses when I can, and this is one of those. The last thing I'll say about this is that this is also blurbed by Ed Tarkington, who wrote Only Love Can Break Your Heart, which I flipping loved. And he says, if you were to throw a separate piece, Dead Poet Society, and The Secret History into a literary blender, you might get something like The Shadow of the Lions, which manages to be both a poignant coming-of-age tale and a suspenseful mystery. So anything that has a secret history as a comparison is going to be something I have to pick up. The next book that I want to talk to you about is called The Coddling of the American Mind: How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure. And this was written by a social psychologist and a First Amendment expert, and their names are Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. I have the library copy that does not have the sexy jacket on it. But this is a book that was recommended to me by my husband. We both work in higher education. And in higher ed, there are a lot of conversations that are happening right now about First Amendment issues and what students should and should not be subjected to, what ideas are off limits, what are acceptable, what is triggering, what is not, all of that. And this book is something that he said he wanted me to read, not because he necessarily agreed with everything, but because he thought it was interesting and thought-provoking. And basically, the argument behind this book is that we have coddled youth too much, that by the time they get to college, we have not let them have raw experiences. We have not let them figure things out for themselves. We have not let them make mistakes. We have offered them too much safety, psychological safety, physical safety, safety in every sense of the word. And that by the time they get to college, this sort of starts manifesting negative repercussions because students are not ready for the real world. They are not ready for difficult discourse around tricky topics in their classrooms. They are not ready to be challenged when it comes to moral issues, ideological issues, things like that. You know, they have very black and white thinking, and they are not always able to handle new ideas or ideas that might be outside of what they have been taught is right or moral or acceptable, all of that. And how we further that on college campuses by protecting them from speakers that could come in that could be controversial. I don't know. I haven't read the book yet, but I'm very curious to see what it has to say about what we're doing on college campuses and whether it's good or bad. So that's something that I'll read just for like personal interest and professional development, I guess. Things to think about. Then the last book that I know I'm going to read, because I am in the middle of it, is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. And I will save my review for later on, but essentially this book takes place at a very posh upscale wedding on a remote island off the coast of Ireland. And this is sort of a mid-list couple in society. The bride is the creator of a woman's digital magazine called The Download, and the husband is a celebrity that is sort of the main guy on a reality television show called Survive the Night or something along those lines, where he has to use his brain and brawn to survive the elements when he's put in these extreme situations out in the wild in like all this adverse weather, and he has to find his way to safety. So kind of like Survivor, but a one-man operation. And this bride is choosing this remote locale because she wants to do something that has never been done before so that she can feature her own nuptials in her magazine to sort of raise the profile of both her and her husband. But the night of the wedding, the weather goes nuts and the lights start to flicker and the power goes out, and then a cater waiter comes in screaming that she has seen a dead body out on the beach, and things go haywire from there. I am really enjoying it so far, but again, I'll review it later, so I will leave that for another time. Those are the books that I know I'm going to read. I'm a mood reader, so I'd like to give myself a little bit of wiggle room. Also, with January, jumping back into work after vacation and the holidays is going to probably do a number on me and my attention span. So we're gonna keep it light, see how it goes. I would love to know in the comments below what you are reading.